Just what is it that draws gamers, be they the hardcore kind or the casual variety, to a game? Is it a story with deep themes, a colorful cast of recognizable characters? Is it the graphics? What about innovative gameplay? I guess my real question is, what turns a prospective buyer away from a game? I'm asking these questions because, as a fan of the Yakuza series, I'm trying my best to figure out why it's just not as popular here as it could be. Oh, don't get it twisted. I don't intend to softball Yakuza 0 or anything. I will inform you, however, that if this extremely well put together prequel doesn't get you into this decades old franchise, nothing will. Though, don't think I won't try my damnedest to convince you. The narrative itself revolves around various organizations attempting to acquire a plot of land that will ultimately contribute to the landscape of the city of Kamurocho seen in the very first game, and this scheme has a major effect on two people in particular. Kazuma Kiryu is a young foot soldier in the Dojima group who is framed for murder who must prove his innocence, while Goro Majima is the manager of a popular cabaret in Sultanbori, an area in Osaka that doubles as his prison. The search for the owner of the empty lot forces these two men to learn what it really means to be individuals in an organization that strictly discourages that. Kiryu starts off as a violent thug and ultimately mellows out to be the big good of the series. Majima is bottling up both his passion for fighting and his freedom of expression and eventually learns that, I guess. So many people have said that Majima's story is more interesting, and I'd have to disagree. Yes, Majima as a character is more interesting because Kiryu is still as stoic as ever, which isn't really as fresh, but he barely changes by the end. Not only that, but the enemies he butts heads with aren't nearly as memorable. I mean, Nishitani here may be the Majima prototype, but Awano is simply more original and therefore cooler in my opinion. Regardless, since this is a Yakuza game, the main story is filled with a cast of colorful, well-written characters that all have distinct motivations and personalities, and this makes it a joy to play. There are also the sub-stories, side quests with minor characters, whose tone sits in rather stark contrast to the main tale. I mean, I don't need to tell you that the idea of a dude talking to you about jizz and his tighty whities out in public, or protecting not Michael Jackson during his not Thriller video shoot by not Steven Spielberg is just a bit crazy. But so is the idea of the main story having even a remotely positive ending. You'd think the mood whiplash would detract from the overall story, but I find it welcome, and I haven't laughed as hard at, well, anything in quite a while. The main story is also, to me, the best written one since Yakuza 2, though since the focus has been reduced to two characters, the antagonists are the most charismatic since Ryu Ga Gotoku, and the plot is a bit more grounded in reality this time. Except the constant fighting in the streets, Bob still wearing this clown makeup, and Kuze. This bastard is just unrealistically tenacious, and I remember the time Majima drove a truck through a building. This web of intrigue is woven in the form of a pseudo open-world adventure game where players roam Kamurocho as Kiryu and Sultanbori as Majima, righting wrongs and busting heads, and also reading. A lot. Digesting story bits, heading to waypoints, and getting into fights is the main gameplay loop, broken up by instances where you'll be introduced to major and minor minigames available, and the aforementioned sub-stories. This is all old hat for gamers, so big picture, there won't be any issues adjusting to the Japanese flavor. Though it takes a little bit of time for first-timers to get used to it, I can also say the same thing about the combat. Though guns are sometimes used, Agokudo's primary weapons are fists and knives, and you'll be punching quite a few dudes in the streets and back alleys here. Pressing square multiple times in quick succession performs a rush combo, with triangle activating a finishing blow. There's also a quick step with a generous number of iframes and a grab maneuver that opens foes up to various punishment. Laying the smackdown on thugs builds heat, which allows you to perform bone-crunching specials for massive damage, and the number of these violent finishers increases as you progress through the game. The biggest addition to combat in Yakuza 0 is the inclusion of different fighting styles for both characters. 3 are unlocked normally upon observation of experts performing them on the street, with a 4th available for the more diligent players, and each is drastically different with various strengths and weaknesses. You have your balanced stance, a weaker one for mobility and building heat, and a stance built for tanking and dishing out mad damage, and they're all useful in specific scenarios, though you'll end up sticking with your favorite. All of the stances can be upgraded using money you literally beat out of the bad guys, allowing you to deal and take more damage and dish out a wider variety of context-specific heat actions. Though money is in short supply early on, you'll ultimately be rolling in dough from your business ventures and another specific element of the game, so beefing up your characters and seeing the sights won't really be a problem. There are a couple of problems though, and they mainly come to light when fighting these guys. There are two big bastards in each city that roam the area and instigate fights, where losing means getting shaken down for your hard-earned cash. These guys are insanely strong and can take you out with 1 or 2 hits, but beating them nets you boatloads of new capital and insight into why they're jumping fools. Just make sure not to fight them in alleys, because the lack of room and a pretty terrible free camera in these situations will definitely result in you ending up broke. You can also end up trapped in corners in more open areas, which is equally annoying, though the enemy AI is as dumb as a sack of rocks, so you'll ultimately end up learning how to cheese them. But why is this even necessary? Make the dude smarter, give him more moves, and make him less of a damage sponge. Save that cheap shit for Amon. Also, seriously, it's been a decade. A small icon or circle indicating exactly which dude you're fixing to pummel would be great after 11 games. Once you get used to everything though, combat is a breeze and you'll be breaking the faces of hooligans and bosses alike with no problem and making bank while doing it. And you can use that dough to spend at restaurants, play minigames, and invest into your businesses to ultimately make more money. Doing all of this is encouraged through accumulation of completion points, or CP, that can be spent at a shrine. CP can be used to unlock passive and active traits that improve the overall experience, from increasing the distance your characters can dash to the amount of cash you beat out of clowns. Definitely worth spending. I mentioned minigames and they are plentiful. Also, I didn't like them all. Good God, do I hate getting stuck against the wall in a disco dancing mode. Also, disco sucks. I personally struggle with the pocket circuit mode, specifically the intermediate course, until I discovered the stabilizer and lucked out on the Million End Dream Machine with this awesome motor. If you enjoy games where gear matters more than skill, Pocket Circuit is for you. And if you don't, I guess too bad, because completing it is a requirement to maximizing fighters' friendship level, which is a requirement to manage this game's building in the real estate game, which is a step toward getting that secret fighting style. If you're a completionist, a lot of the game is interconnected in this manner, and the rabbit hole goes deep, guys. You've been warned. As a game releasing only on the PlayStation 4 in the West, Yakuza 0 looks pretty disappointing, but understand that this is the localization of a PS3 game released in 2015, running mostly at 60 frames per second, and playing a game at that frame rate is always amazing. The character and environment models look crisp at full 1080p with basic texture filtering and anti-aliasing, but there are plenty of texturing shortcuts and model streaming tricks out in plain sight to tell you why everything else looks so damn good. Main characters are especially detailed, clogged pores and all, but more minor folks that still get a lot of screen time don't get the same treatment. Can someone tell me why Marina looks good but Yamanoi looks like a random NPC? It looks just a bit lazy. A lot of the characters take on the look of their voice actors, including the giant guy shaking you down for cash, and that's an extra step I wasn't expecting. Seeing Riki Takeuchi, an actor I love and respect, ham it up is great, but I wasn't expecting Kenji Oe or Yuki Sato as Mr. Shakedown characters, probably because they usually play more benign roles elsewhere and aren't nearly as diesel as they're depicted here. All of the music here is great, and though it doesn't beat the soundtrack of, say, Yakuza 3, it is well composed. I especially like the different songs for the 8 stances and the callbacks to specific tracks from the original game. Ambient sounds are also impeccable, keeping you orally aware of your surroundings, and the combination of animation and voice work makes you believe in the struggles of these fictional characters. I just wish more time had been put into the facial work outside of the cutscenes. These cutscenes here were fully animated, and sub-stories were voiced. That shit needs to happen come Yakuza 7. Could you imagine what Mr. Libido actually sounded like? Yakuza 0 is a fresh and fantastic exploration of a storied series that introduces new characters and expands on those that were only seen in the original game. While there are a few elements of the game that are less enjoyable, and the game doesn't really scream current gen, there is so much here to find, see, and do in the densely packed streets of Tokyo and Osaka that any grievances you may have will most likely feel minor by comparison. With Yakuza Kiwami releasing sometime in summer 2017, this is the perfect chance to dive into what I now consider to be the first part of one of the best crime dramas ever conceived. It's definitely worth it at full price. And hey, think of it this way, even if you screw up here, at least you still keep all 10 fingers.